Strings of Malice, Book 1. Snowflake in an Alley. An Old Mother Nonsense Story. Chapter 7. Fortuitous Delay. Reade, 18th Ikrit. Monkekoos was a fair deal nicer than an area, depending on whom one asked. Without the dreadful smog, the air was clearer and smelled of fresh pine. The buildings reflected cream in the unblocked sunlight, and the people were more smiles than frowns. There were a fair bit of travellers, though few foreigners compared to the coastal cities, and many pleasant locals had had the main streets lined with little shops of the practical kind. It was the sort of place one could settle, if one was so inclined, and many were, if the laughter of younglings rushing about was any indication. There was only one thing to potentially dull the atmosphere of the place's overall inviting nature: the very fact that a witch lived nearby. Lunrith had not been able to convince Irinka to let him go to visit with Granny alone. Not even the doctor's silver tongue, nor the lady's whining about the loss of her newly acquired handmaiden, had deterred her one bit. Nimue, as she had come to insist the man call her, had been less than pleased, and revoked her eagerly anticipated shopping trip with the girl until she came to her senses. "Next thing, you'll come back and have sold your new clothes for a wish," the woman had harumphed as though it were already a given, and rather obviously stowed away her purse, before she turned and made off for an inn. Lunrith had hidden an amused smile behind his hand at the look of relief that had come over his sister's face. The girl hadn't even had the decency to wait for the woman to be fully turned away before making such a face. Thank the gods above and below, Nimue was far too busy sulking to notice. They would leave later than Lunrith would have liked, but the slippers lent to her sister would no doubt suffer in the rough terrain up to the Crackle Creek cottage. Not to mention that the trip may also go smoother with at least another blanket between them. However, fate must have been with them, for their impromptu stop at a small shoe shop had introduced them to a woman who'd sweetly informed them that two of the Crackle Creek sisters had left to see about some trouble in the Waveless Isles, but that the youngest had remained behind at the cottage. How did she know this? Well, the young shoemaker was due any day now, on the next full moon, as a matter of fact, and the sisters would not see their prize, traded for a love potion, spirited away in the night, simply because they weren't home. The young woman had eventually introduced herself as Elena. She offered to put both Lunrith and Irinka up for the next 2 days, in the small apartments above her store, if they would take the newborn with them when they went to the cottage. She didn't expect she would be up for a day's travel after squeezing out a youngling. A quick negotiation for a free pair of boots, on top of the board and taking care of the woman's home while they were there, suited the trio down to the ground. It made Lunrith feel increasingly better about his sister tagging along on his errand. Irinka had struck the deal, after all, and she had done so far more gracefully than the last time. He wondered if it was her wit developing, now that she had the situation to refine it, or if she was learning from observing the doctor. Reade, 19th Ikrit. Elena had not been wrong when she'd said that timing was everything. The following evening, as the new moon rose, they saw a small baby girl come into the world. A small vial of perfume on the woman's kitchen counter, not an hour later, lit the dark counter with a soft pink glow, had proven her deal complete. She had only taken the youngling to her breast because the midwife had insisted, but she practically shoved it at Irinka the moment the sour-faced medic had left. Lunrith quickly snatched it away when his sister nearly broke it, not knowing she was supposed to hold its neck. He didn't suspect Granny Cracklecreep would even see them if they damaged her property. He swaddled it back into a small blanket and sent Irinka to boil water, for both soup and a cloth bath for the new mother. Reade, 21st Ikrit. The sailor had spent the eve and morning keeping watch while the youngling slept. When it eventually grew hungry, Elena was nowhere to be found. She had gone out, not returned, and the babe gradually grew more distraught with every passing minute. Lanrith tried everything he could, but it would not ease. Irinka shrank back from it, suspecting the thing to be possessed. Nothing so tiny should be able to make such a noise, and nothing living a noise so ungodly. It was on the verge of screeching its displeasure instead of merely wailing it, when a tap sounded at the door. A boy in a red sash asked for Lanrith by name, and produced a basket filled with glass bottles and goat's milk upon the confirmation, as well as a short note in the doctor's elegantly messy scrawl.
I don't know what you are up to, but I hope you know what you are doing, my friend. Dr. G. P.S. I've enclosed in this envelope 2 rings as per our agreement. The one with turquoise is for you, and the one with pink is for your sister. Please ensure you put them on at the same time.
Lanrith quickly handed the basket to Irinka and showed her how to warm the milk in a vat of hot water. While they waited, he paced the small kitchen. Around and around the table he went, letting the little thing half suckle on his fingers until her breakfast was ready. Irinka had accused him of magic when he finally managed to get the babe to latch onto the bottle, and it instantly stilled, content now that it had got what it wanted. He had smiled at her tiredly, and gratefully took the chair at the small kitchen table when she pulled it out for him. She sat across from her brother and watched him handle the crotch goblin as though it were something precious. There were mixed feelings seeing him be so good with it.
Do you have kids?
Irinka asked aloud, settling on yes and no questions, since her brother's hands were otherwise occupied. He didn't look up from the babe as he shook his head. Irinka felt her face scowl, though she wasn't quite sure why.
Did you have any before?
He shook his head again.
But you've looked after babies?
She speculated. He did raise his eyes to her then, a proud smile on his lips as he winked at her.
That must have been a horrid job,
Irinka decided, leaning against the table with a sigh.
I mean, I would have found it horrid. You don't seem to mind.
Lanrith shrugged his shoulders non-committally. She was sure there was more, but he couldn't tell her just yet.
You can tell me after we see the witch,
she offered with a smile.
We should go to the pub later too. I have lots of questions.
Lanrith offered her a nervous smile, but she could see that he was excited at the idea as he nodded eagerly. Not much longer now. By late morning, the babe had been changed and was soundly sleeping once again. Lanrith and Irinka did as the doctor had instructed. Standing beside the crib, the girl had counted to 3 and they both slipped on the jewelry. A small flash of light in the stones indicated they'd done it correctly. He had taught her to safely hold and feed the youngling while he packed for their journey, not having had the time to do so earlier with the child understandably fussing. On their way out of town, Lanrith had glimpsed sight of Elena. She was hanging off the arm of a rotund gentleman who was all but drowning in parcels as she pulled him into a mantua. He didn't bother pointing her out for Irinka to call out to. He'd cared for children for such women before. It really did any good to force them into a connection they had never wanted to begin with. Despite the addition to their party of 2, the trip up to the ridge where the cottage of the Crackle Creek sisters sat was, all things considered, pleasant. The youngling mostly slept, comfortable in her sling across Lanrith's chest, and only woke every few hours to drink and poop. It was something Irinka hadn't considered would happen, though she should have. When Lanrith had silently laughed at her disturbed and disgusted face, she would blame it on the abhorrent discovery that such a tiny thing could exude such a grotesque pong. However, a convenient river and a fussy few scowls at the cold water hadn't taken them more than an hour out of their trip. Nearing the bottom of the ridge, only a half hour past sunset, they debated a moment on whether to knock tonight or wait until new light. It was the strangest thing. Lanrith had been working towards this moment for years, and yet, now, when what he'd craved for so long was no more than a hill's climb away, he felt hesitant. The fear of not knowing, of possible rejection and denial of his request. He feared it more than he could have put words to. And Irinka, God's bless her, could see he was struggling, even if the reason why was unclear to her. She sat him on a rock and told him to feed the baby while she set up a small camp for them. They heard things moving in the forest as they made ready for sleep, yet nothing came near. She would suspect it had something to do with their little charge. Even the wild beasts knew not to take what belonged to the sisters of this place. While they ate, Irinka asked her brother if he had ever made a deal with a witch before. He shook his head and gestured that he had only heard tales and read about them in books. The girl kept her voice low, lest she wake the little one, though set about insisting that he be careful not to be taken for a ride. Lanrith listened attentively to all her wonderful ideas, nodding whenever she paused to ensure he understood. He insisted that she should not forget her own advice. A cool wind picked up and drove the trio for cover within the hour. It weaved about the hills and whistled a soft tune as it scraped gently along their tent on its way past. With the soft puffs of the infant's breathing against his chest, its little fists clenched into his long hair, and Irinka curled up against his back to keep off the chill, it was a deep and dreamless sleep that found the Jinran that bright evening. It was the kind of restful sleep Lanrith had only had when he was deep in vice before. That should have been the first clue that it was, while utterly wonderful, entirely unnatural.